Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. And first of all, I want to point out that somehow Emily and Carrie are both positioned so nicely on the screen. I just can't get myself in the right, I don't know what I need to do differently. But anyway, I'm excited to have this conversation. You two have produced a book that's just fantastic, and I can't wait to talk about it. So let me start with a bit of an introduction for the two of you. Psychologist Emily Weinstein and sociologist Carrie James are both Harvard researchers and co-authors, which I find fascinating, of Behind Their Screen, What Teens Are Facing and Adults Are Missing. So first of all, thank you for being here with us. And I want to put out there how it's always, from my perspective as the mother of 5 kids, and from people who connect with us through Your Teen, it's always our deepest desire to understand what our kids are thinking. And they don't often bring us into that conversation. They're not like, come check out every emotion I have that you want to know. But here, you kind of did that work for us. So thank you. Thank you for letting us know what teenagers are thinking. Some of them might even reflect our own kids and what they're thinking. So let's just start with, tell us a little bit about your research. I think 3,500 teenagers, is that how many you connected with? And you have a teen advisory board, so you really understand teenagers at this point.
Well, Carrie and I have been studying teens and screens for a little over a decade now, together and separately. And we just love this work. We find it so interesting, but we've been completely obsessed with questions about what it looks and feels like to grow up with social media and smartphones. And in this latest study we did, as you mentioned, we had this amazing opportunity to collect perspectives from more than 3,500 teenagers across the US about the things that they love about technology, the things that are hardest for them. And this book is really about unpacking some of the pain points, and we reveal in the book the things that teens told us they most wished adults understood, and that they most consistently felt like adults did not understand. And we just had so much fun breaking down, working with teens. Carrie will talk about this in a sec, but working with teens every step of the way to really think about how to break down what's myth, what's reality, and how adults can have better conversations with the teens in their lives.
Okay, so let's jump right into that, Carrie. Like what were the things, like if you had to pick, the top, what were the things that kids wished we understood that we're just getting it so wrong?
Oh, so much. I mean, like top level.
Could you be gentler about that?
There's not just one thing, and be forewarned. There's so much. I mean, I think importantly, top level, the worries that adults have are surprisingly shared by teens. Like things like digital habits. Like we look at our teens and we worry they're addicted to their devices, and they all they want is around the clock access. They do want access, and it's complicated, the reasons why. But importantly, they actually worry about what it's doing to them. They worry about their digital habits. So that's just one example, and we can say more about that. Digital footprints. We assume like teens post things online and they don't care about the risks. They're not alert to the fact that they have this trail that will follow them for a very long time, if not forever. They are alert to that risk, but it's so much more complicated. There are social pulls and pressures. There are lots of dynamics. We think that teens send nudes because they don't understand the risks. They do, but when you pull back the curtain, when you really listen to teens and understand their experiences, and granted, we were in a really unique position. We were not the parents of the particular teens who we spoke with, and so there was a lot more openness. We recruited this incredible group of 22 teens from different parts of the US, different identities. They brought different perspectives to bear, and they worked with us side by side as we looked at that broader data set of perspectives from 3,500 teens. And that was incredibly powerful because those teen advisors really helped us identify the things that adults were missing and the things that adults most needed to hear about growing up in this world.
So what would be, Emily, the biggest surprise that if you said to parents, they'd be like, that can't possibly be true?
Oh, I love the framing of that question. Okay, so one that stands out to me is that very consistently we heard from teens that they wished that they could change aspects of their tech habits, that they did not want to feel dysregulated and they did not want to be on their screens all the time. And we had collected so many quotes that just sounded like they could have come right from adults. Like, I'm worried about missing out on my childhood and like what all this screen time is costing me. And we started to really unpack with teens why it is that they harbor these feelings, but are so reticent to share them with adults. And one of the things that is so obvious once you think about it is that often adults are in this kind of gatekeeping role, and teens are worried about two things. They feel like we already assume the worst of technology, and anything they say about what's hard about it will just lead to us saying like, see, I told you this tech is so bad. So they're hesitant to bring the struggles to us. And they worry about us doubling down on restrictions and restricting their screen time. And that feels problematic because I think Carrie was hinting at this, but we heard so much from teens about the ways that they feel pressure to stay connected as part of being a good friend in a digital age. That was something that I think we knew a little bit, but actually hearing teens talk about like, there are moments when I want to disconnect for my own self-care, but I feel like if I'm not available, it will have real consequences for my friends, for my friendships, for my friends' lives. There were quotes that we just kept coming back to about things like, about teens saying things like, I'm worried if I'm not available when a friend needs me, that I won't be able to keep them from harming themselves or worse.
What a burden.
What a big burden on young shoulders. And I think so many of us are alert to the idea of to the trends in adolescent mental health and to the very real adolescent mental health crisis in our country. One of the things that Carrie and I saw in our data was that, even if teens are not themselves struggling with their own mental health, they're actually more likely than ever to have friends who are struggling or peers who are struggling. And because of social media, many of those struggles are taking place in public or semi-public ways. Those friends are reaching out for support. And so you can have parents saying like, on the one hand, can you just get off your phone? Or like, you're so addicted to the technology, and teens feeling these real pressures and burdens for all different reasons to keep their phones nearby.
So Carrie, like what my thought is like, should we be asking them, can we help them?
Well, I mean, one of the big things we learned is that teens actually want adult help. But we often start our conversations with them in the wrong places. We walk in with a lot of judgment and assumptions about what's going on. And so we've found, and again, easier for us when we're talking with teens and we're not their parent. I am a parent, by the way, but that's another story.
And I am too.
As well. We're both
Yeah.
moms, so that's key. But as researchers, when we're talking to a teen, leaning into non-judgmental curiosity, really wanting to know what's hard about like feeling like you need to be constantly attached to your phone. But also a really important power move when we talk with teens about tech, and this is something I deploy as a parent too, is asking them about what's good, what's so compelling about TikTok and fun about it, even when we worry that they're spending too much time. Really tuning into those positives is a really important first step, because then I think so often when we start these conversations with our teens, they fear that whatever they say, especially if it's something tricky or bad, is only going to confirm our worst suspicions that it's all bad and we should shut it down. So leaning into the positives is incredibly powerful, and that sort of curiosity piece.
And you can ask then about the challenges. I mean, that's what we do when we interview teens, right? We start with questions about what do you love about technology? What's great about growing up with these platforms and social media? And then we move into talking about what's hardest and what they are worried about. And we've just found consistently that process of like starting with the good and then talking about the challenges, it completely changes the kinds of stories we end up hearing.
It just feels like I have more compassion after reading and watching you guys talk about your research than I did before, in that kind of like visceral reaction of like, oh my God, just put it away. Right. And instead thinking about why are you on it right now offers such a different, like the tone of voice shifts so much with that approach. I think really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, one of our colleagues and collaborators is one of the world's experts on empathy, and she read our book and she said this is such an incredible empathy induction exercise. Reading this book and really tuning in to what's hard about growing up with tech.
And one of the things that I think that we found so interesting is how to actually get to empathy, because of course we know that empathy really helps us connect and have better conversations, but how do we access it when we have this instinctive reaction so often to just eye roll? Like I had this yesterday. I was trying to drive in my town and there was a group of like teenagers in costumes, like recording a TikTok dance right in the middle of the crosswalk. And I was like, oh, like I needed to get to school for school pickup. And I just like so many of us, I think, have that instinct of like, pay attention to where you are, or like rolling our eyes at some behavior. But this book, I think one of the things that we started doing as we were doing this research that was so helpful for us in accessing our own empathy was thinking about what we could relate to from our own experiences. So much feels new and different, but one of the things, for example, is we talk about this idea that we can all kind of remember back to the dynamics of the middle school lunchroom. So if you can think about how you felt like walking, or maybe it's your high school, but think about how you felt like walking into the lunchroom, looking around, trying to figure out who to sit with, where your friends were. And maybe you knew exactly which group you were sitting with and that felt really good. Or maybe you were like in a fight with your friends one day and you felt like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to go. And that felt really anxiety provoking. Maybe you had a day where you like ate lunch in the bathroom because you just felt so nervous about where you were going to fit in. The reality is that in many ways, it's like that school lunchroom is on the screen in front of teens all the time now. And it's complete with all of these social life analytics that are always available, updating in real time. And there's this like very public nature, plus all these new types of social information. So, we were hearing from teens about things like, parents are talking a lot about cyberbullying, but a lot of what's hard is like when I look at SnapMap and I see that all my friends' Snapchat avatars are clustered in one place, and immediately I realize that I've been left out. Or when I go on Venmo and I see like an exchange for Dunkin' Donuts between my 3 best friends. And I'm like, why wasn't I invited to Dunkin' Donuts?
And
you're
who
like,
even knew that Venmo could cause a feeling of being left out? Like, it's an app to pay back people money. It's crazy.
totally.
How many
And so
ways
the
you
way
can
that
be
this
bruised?
becomes social. Sorry?
There's so many ways to be bruised. I mean, who
Yeah.
wants to think back on middle school and amplify it? It's horrible.
I know. And can you think about like if you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend and you were really sad about it, and then you started monitoring, like maybe they have 700 followers on Instagram, and you start monitoring their following and follower counts to see when they change, to try and then go through the entire list of people who they follow and see if it's like a new cute person who they're interested in, and like just the quantity of social information that if you are inclined to worry about, you can worry about is so much greater than it has ever been. And the adolescent brain is actually really sensitive to that exact kind of social information that's on offer.
And our knee-jerk reaction as parents, because we want to protect our kids, is like, delete the app or get off of social media, but that doesn't erase it. We've talked with teens who were late arrivals to social media, who maybe had a phone but didn't use social media apps, and maybe because their parents wouldn't allow them. But there was this whole other level of missing out. They were completely cut out of the loop socially in terms of the jokes that were being told in the actual lunchroom at school and social plans that were being made that they were oblivious to. So even as we strive to protect our teens from these things, there's a reality that you can't entirely step away from it.
The pain in that is that you hear these stories about kids taking their lives and that the bullying was happening online. And my thought is always, why didn't someone take the phone away? But you're offering this other reason why you can't just take the phone away. It's like, excising them from their whole world.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, the confluence and the reality that in many cases, kids who are struggling with cyberbullying online are also struggling with bullying offline. And so there's this confluence and amplification of risk factors is just like, it's a really complicated set of dynamics that are like playing out. And one of the things that's really hard for kids is that in some cases, not always, but sometimes the phone is actually a portal of access to the social support they most want and need when they're having hard social situations. And so if maybe like the cyberbullying is happening through my phone, but my phone is also the way I'm connecting with my friends from summer camp or from my, my cousins who live far away. And that's how I'm feeling supported and validated. And so I have to make a decision to either cut off both or, and to cut off both of those things at once or to have both of those things coming at me. And that's just an area where I think kids really need adult support and guidance. Like, what should you do if you're on the receiving end?
I mean, what
You don't know the answer to that question. Do you have the answer? I mean,
Depends
how would I help my kid? Like, I just want to take their phone away. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah. Well, the kind of unsatisfying answer is it depends a lot on what's going on and why, what platform it's happening on, who do they know who's behind it, or is it anonymous? Is it someone from school? Is it happening offline as well? Like, really, I think like our first move, and this is something Carrie and I've seen again and again, like our first move has to be to get really curious and to ask a lot of questions about what they know, what they need, and then obviously to like really be alongside them in strategizing. Different kids want and need different things. And and there's a difference between also like messages. Teens tell us there's a huge difference between messages that are coming directly to you but are private versus when all of a sudden the aggression is happening in a public or semi-public way. If people are like, we talk about T accounts in the book, like when people are sharing gossip or rumors, maybe true, maybe not true, on behind anonymous Instagram accounts, and you're trying to figure out the reputational impacts on top of the emotional aftermath. So,
well, it sounds like I don't have to know the answer. I have to talk to my kid about what would be helpful for them.
Absolutely. That is exactly right. What would be helpful for them? I mean, so much of what we learned in listening to teens was about how adults with the best of intentions really miss the mark because, we tell our kids things like your digital footprint lasts forever. When they already know that, but they feel like their footprint is out of control, it only amplifies their anxiety and it doesn't really give them a sense of what to do. So especially in cases like we were discussing around explicit aggression and cyberbullying and feeling like, one is the victim of aggression, really understanding the context, the details, and what our kids want us to do to help them.
Okay, so a lot of this conversation is around the kids telling you that they want the parents to be involved, that they value what the parents have to offer. But as the parent of teenagers, I rarely get the sense that they are waiting for me to weigh in on their life. So, what are we getting wrong that they want us in the conversation, and yet we're not really feeling that way from our kids?
Carrie, since you're in it parenting the teen years, I feel like you should take this one.
Well, I mean, I think I think we can get hung up on, and I have a little bit of an edge here being a media researcher, but we can get hung up on the reality that we're not as literate with many of the apps that teens use. And so, if we don't understand the ins and outs of how to use Snapchat, how can we advise our kids? But that need not be a stumbling block to being there for our kids around hard issues. We all remember what it was like. Emily referenced the middle school lunchroom. We all remember what it was like to have been a teen. It might have been, for me in particular, a moment when there weren't digital technologies to document things, to have those social analytics. But the feelings around like wanting to be liked, wanting to have validation from peers, wanting to connect, wanting to develop a romantic relationship, all of those things are things that should be familiar to us, that we can tap into and we can use as leverage, and really give a lot of empathy and validation for what's hard. So being there for kids. I mean, I have two kids who are they're really different from one another. And I knew this as a media researcher, that Teens are not a monolith. And that, the particular really matters. But boy, becoming a parent and having 2 kids and seeing how different they are really makes me realize how my digital parenting needs to really be key to their particular strengths and vulnerabilities. So I have a younger kid who won't talk to me. She's more of a closed book. And so all of those wonderful open-ended questions that work in our research and in fact work with my older kid fall flat at best with my younger kids. So there are a variety of different strategies I use. One thing that I do, and Emily and I are big fans of this, is I speak out loud some of the tensions and puzzles that I feel and see when I'm on my own social media. And this is where having some level of social media can be really helpful as a parent. So I'll look at Instagram and say, wow, everyone's looking like they're like living their best lives on these amazing vacations. That can't always be true. Like everyone can't always be this happy. And I know that even though my younger child won't necessarily open up and describe how she felt that too, because she can't articulate that necessarily, I know she's listening to me. And so those kinds of messages, those kinds of supports we can give in a more like passive way can be really helpful.
I want to say that the best phrasing I've ever heard about a difficult dynamic, it fell flat. I'm so using that. I can't imagine like feeling anything less, like it's so much more extreme at the moment, but it's such a lovely way to say like didn't go as planned.
Yeah. And gosh, like haven't we all had those experiences? I feel like I'm constantly having this, like I see some parenting tip on Instagram and then I try it and I'm like, well, that backfired. Like,
Yeah.
Wow, my kid does not like it when I label her emotions for her as she's figuring out whatever is going on.
It is all customizing. So one question, in your research, did any kids tell you that their parents were getting it right?
Yes. Yes, that for sure. And one of the things that was, I think, really cool that we liked seeing so much was kids. Well, first of all, for some kids, they just have great relationships with their parents. And so the parenting around technology is just a natural extension of a connection they're already feeling. Like they feel really like understood and cared about and loved. And there's like, we talk a lot about things teens need and like what all the parenting, like warmth, boundaries, like unconditional positive regard. They feel like their parents assume that they're doing their best and they really feel that. And that translates to bringing things to their parents because they're like, I know that my mom is going to trust me or my dad is going to trust me that I wouldn't have gotten myself in a situation that I could have avoided. I'm like doing my best here. And so they bring different kinds of issues and they strategize together. So that was a big one. The other thing is that—
Can you ask my kids to take your survey?
The other 2 big things that I'll say that really stood out to us are, one, Carrie and I talk a lot about this idea of like gradual release. So starting with much more parental involvement with our younger kids and, our tweens and then sort of like moving towards a gradual release toward more independence as they get older. But one of the things that was really interesting for us, I think in our most recent, like even after we finished the book last summer, we were working with teens and we were asking them about the strategies they use that are most helpful for their digital well-being. And some of the habits strategies are things that their parents kind of put in place and then got their buy-in toward, and then they kept doing. So maybe it's like my mom, in my house, we like have a place where we would put our phones while we were all doing homework. And when I was younger, I just kind of naturally, like my mom set that rule and I did it. But then I saw that it actually made a difference and I get my homework done much faster. And so now, I do that by myself. I put my phone in my backpack or on airplane mode or whatever it is. So that's another one. And then the last thing I'll just say is, and I know, Sue, in your notes, I saw that you had a question about technoference, which I was so glad you brought up. So technoference is the technical term for when technology interferes in the quality of our connections with other people. And technoference is such an interesting and important emerging area of research. And we see in the data that actually technoference can really undercut the quality of our I'm losing an AirPod, can really undercut the quality of our connections with our kids and with our friends and with our partners. And we heard so clearly from teens that they really want our focused attention even when they're struggling to give it to us in return. And this is something that I think more than anything else in the research, Carrie and I, as we were writing this book, we were literally parenting from 0 to 17 in our own households. And this is something that it does not matter what age your kids are, they are noticing your tech habits. And when we start to just get more aware of our own tech habits, and as Carrie said, actually naming out loud, this is really hard. I'm feeling really distracted by my email today. Let me go put my phone in the other room because I really want to focus on this game we're playing or the conversation we're having. Sounds really funny, but that's actually such a power move. And it communicates not only that we care about connecting, but also it models that kind of mindfulness around tech distractions and strategies that we use when they come up.
So just narrating what you're doing.
Thinking out loud for your kids. I mean, and just having them hear that it normalizes the stresses, normalizes the pulls. I'm feeling, like Emily said, I'm feeling really distracted right now. And this was, there were so many opportunities for this during that moment in the pandemic when we were all at home. And I needed to pull away from my computer. I was writing this book with Emily, and my child would actually take my hand and pull me away. And I was like, you are right. I need to close this down. So we do that kind of modeling. One asterisk that I want to, one further note that I want to make about the tech habits piece, because Emily is so right. There were many teens who told us that the things that their parents put in place stuck with them, but that's not always going to be the case. We use the expression fall flat, and there are plenty of cases where rules we try to put in place fall flat. And that makes sense in a way, because we don't always tune into the details of why our teens want to be on their screens at particular times of day. One of the things that we found is the power of talking with kids about tech habits and really opening up the conversation and hearing from them the habits that are working, that they've established themselves that are working well for them, and the things that they want to change, and starting there rather than going in necessarily with this kind of list of rules, especially as our teens get older.
Okay, so this is going to be my last question. So what's the good news?
We came away from this research, I think, so hopeful because we had such a clear sense that teens really want to have healthy, happy relationships with each other, with themselves, with technology, with their families. And we also for sure saw the ways that is really hard and complicated by technology. I think Carrie and I have been talking recently about this idea that it feels kind of like we're in this moment where we have cars, but we haven't figured out all the infrastructure we need around us to help everyone use them as safely as possible, like speed limits and seatbelts and airbags and driver's ed classes and road tests. If you think about all of the things we put in place, I think we both feel like we have a long way to go as a society, but we're hopeful that actually we will do that, and we will figure out that 10-year-olds need different things and need different boundaries and parameters around if they're going to be on apps. We think regulation is going to be extremely important in that, but we're hopeful that that's going to happen. We see the role of parents, but we don't think this should be all on parents' shoulders. And we see the role of personal agency, but we don't think that will solve all the problems. So I think we feel hopeful because we feel like teens are really motivated. They have not lost the desire to have healthy, happy relationships. And we now have work cut out for us to do to figure out how to create the whole societal infrastructure around them so that these technologies are not interfering with that.
Wow, so that's hopeful, huh? It sounds like a lot of work.
Well, we have work to do, but I think actually having a clearer sense of what's ahead is really helpful. And in the interim, we break down every chapter in the book ends with teens want a section called Teens Want Adults to Know. That's just a really simple snapshot of whatever the topic, sexting, footprints, here is what teens really want adults to know for immediate interventions and steps you're taking.
You guys have a final copy of your book to hold up? Do you have a what?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I only have a pre. There you go. All right. And they can get it anywhere online?
Behindtheirscreens.com has links to anywhere you want to buy it, as well as a number of other resources, a reading guide for groups that want to have a book discussion about it. So
clearly everyone listening must get this book. And Carrie, do you have anything last for what's
Are you hopeful, Carrie?
Oh, I'm absolutely hopeful. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning about this top level finding that a lot of the concerns that teens have are shared with adults. So often we find ourselves in an us versus them battle over tech. But once we tune into the fact that we have these shared concerns, we can be like a team. We can collaborate with our kids and we can all help one another with pulls to the screen and more.
Wow, this was first of all, the book is great. Second of all, you're great interviewers. In interviewees, whatever you are, you were great.
That's right.
We'll do that one. Thanks so much for being here with us today.